Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Target Smart podcast. I'm your host, Albert Morales. Special thanks and shout out to our producer, Anthony Sanfilippo, who helps us pull this together every week. This week, we have a guest who really needs no introduction. Her name is Amy Pritchard. What can I say about Amy that those of you in the political space don't already know? Amy's an entrepreneur. She's a donor, a strategist, organizer, trainer. She builds things. Her work travels have taken her to over 24 countries, doing great work to save democracy, promote it. And she's worked on just about every state in the country here in America. So we're going to invite Amy to come in and
hey, Albert.
Hi, Amy. Thank you again for agreeing to be on our podcast this week. It means a lot to me. Not every week that I get party royalty. No offense to my previous. We have a lot to cover, and anyone in the progressive space who doesn't already know, you must be living under a rock. But I like to start each podcast by asking our guests about their first political gig, what it was, and what it was about that gig that made it clear to them that politics was the way you were going to make your bread. So if you don't mind taking us back a couple of years down memory lane.
Not at all. I was one of those strange kids that figured out what I wanted to do early in life and never really changed it. I guess I was first exposed to the political world when I was in high school. I had a state rep who had a program kind of like Close Up, but she took us to the state capitol and all around government and exposed us to the governor's office and the legislature and the judiciary. And it was a real life civic lesson. And I have the clip where I actually wrote about it in our local newspaper. And that's probably my first, byline. But my first job came a few years after that. Actually, through her, I was so enamored with the process and the political world that I asked her if I could intern. And I had what I realize now was actually very rare, which was an actual paid internship. This was all the way back in, and I'll date myself, 1986. And I got a really cool assignment, which is I got to help the state create a tribute to President Kennedy. There wasn't one, believe it or not, in the state house specifically, I should say. And so there was a commission that didn't really have much of a budget. So I was assigned to help organize the committee of people who were creating a tribute to President Kennedy at the State House. And through that, I met much of the Kennedy family, including John Kennedy and Carolyn Kennedy and Jacqueline Onassis. And Joe Kennedy was actually running for Congress at the time. My congressman was Tip O'Neill, for those of you who remember Tip O'Neill, iconic Speaker of the House. So I grew up in Tip O'Neill's district. So that tells you something for those of you who remember Tip O'Neill. And I got like an incredible exposure to politics super early in my career and access to people that even today it's hard for me to fathom through that, So, and then I went on to Joe Kennedy's campaign, and that's how I ended up going to DC. I got an internship in his office on the Hill when he was elected. And then, of course, I fell in love with DC and politics. And then I worked on the Dukakis campaign, and that's how I got to presidential. And we'll be here all day if I really tell you all the stories. But that gives you my beginning.
But who shepherded you along the way to sort of, obviously you had to be very assertive on your own behalf, but was there a teacher that really encouraged you to do so?
I had so many, really. Yeah. Very early, Nick Petropoulos, who is a advisor to Governor Dukakis, was someone who took me under his wing very early. He went on to become one of the senior advisors to the Dukakis campaign. So again, I had access and got pretty high exposure super early. I met on that campaign Donna Brazil and Mignon Moore, who have been icons and inspirations to me ever since. Teresa Vilmain and Will Robinson are two people who have started then and to this day are inspirations for me. I mean, I could go on. I again feel so lucky because I didn't come from a political family. No one in my family was political. They still don't really understand how I got this bug. I mean, they know, but it certainly wasn't something I was born into or had exposure through anyone else in my life.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I also want to visit a little bit about, you're known for building things. You've, off the top of my head, I can think of BITS, you can think of Democratic Gain, the job bank of the Democratic Party. You probably raised millions of dollars for the party, causes, candidates over the years. What do you think we're missing that if you had the ability to clone yourself, you take on that next project? Is it redistricting? What is it?
Certainly redistricting is a perpetual issue. I really think that I'm just going to say constitutional reform, because I think there are actually a lot of issues that we need to reform that come from our Constitution. Everything from gun control to I think we're actually electoral college is not something we've really tackled meaningfully as a party, as a movement. We certainly talk about it, but I think my number one issue actually that I think is problematic is the electoral college. And then I would also throw in DC statehood into that. I think, we have glorified our Constitution, some for good reasons, but the reality is it's a document that was written by, largely slave owners who didn't want women to go to school or vote, and we live in a very different world today. And I think there's a lot of things in that, from the Supreme Court to, like I said, guns to electoral college and so much more. I mean, redistricting certainly fits into that as well. I think it's an outgrowth of that. I think we have massive inequity in this country right now, and a lot of it comes from these problems.
Yeah, I see the inequity here in my Ruby Red County, Carroll County in Maryland, and it's sad. But you're driving by these homes that have a "Don't tread on me" flag. That's a topic for another day. But I do think constitutional reform is going to be a big one. We'll get into that a little bit later. But not to shortchange the work that's being done out there on redistricting. I know we have great people working on it, but it seems. I remember working on it back in 2000 when I was working with the DNC on a state legislative redistricting project that Terry McAuliffe had convinced donors was a worthy endeavor. And I got to know some of my counterparts at the RNC. And there was this gentleman, Tom Loeffler, who since passed away, but he was the redistricting guru. I remember him telling me, yeah, I have a permanent office in the RNC, and we work 24/7, 365 days a year. I never leave. It's all I do. I do maps. Well, we closed up shop a couple of years later, and then it started again in like 2010 or whatever. Of course, we were way behind. But anyway, be that as it may. So
I think we've made that with the National Democratic Redistricting Committee finally, right? It certainly feels like an important and permanent organization in our, that is blessed and supported by the party. But the work is it may take decades more. It certainly has already been decades, to your point, of working on this, right?
Yeah. So speaking of campaigns, we're in a permanent campaign. I believe that for some time, whether the fact that 1 in 3 women can't get access to an abortion in this country now. I think this week in Iowa, the 6-week ban took effect. You talk to a lot of grassroots operatives throughout the country through the work that you do. Do you think the average activist understands now that there's no day after the election, it just continues? We're gonna have to work really hard to reverse a lot of these laws that were put in place by none other than our former president.
I think the activists, I don't know that the voters do, I do think that, and I give some credit. Well, I feel like we're in a very different space since Trump won in 2016, right? As a party and as a progressive movement, I certainly don't. We're so much bigger than the party, right? But as a movement, as a progressive left movement, including the party, we're in a very different space today than we were pre-16. And so I think, there were groups like Move On and some others that did the sort of perpetual campaign at scale. But we've really seen that up since then. Sorry, I don't know how to even turn that off. I'll get too distracted. But, I think that we still have obviously a tremendous amount of work to do. I think this cycle, I'm bursting out of my skin with excitement about our new nominee. I think we've got a few, today's the day, isn't it? That she becomes the official nominee.
Yeah, that's great.
And so, telling my friends to stop. We good?
Yep.
So I'm bursting out of my skin with excitement and enthusiasm about our new nominee. I think that the party is unified and more mobilized than ever. And I think there's a lot of things to notice about this. You were asking just about whether we're in a perpetual campaign. And for those of us that do this work, for those of us that, and even activists who are, very passionate about some of the issues, we never stop, but we can't do this without this kind of enthusiasm. I was despondent a few weeks ago. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not even sure I knew how depressed I was, because it just felt like such a slog, right? It just felt like we weren't getting there. Nothing has changed, by the way, in terms of the stakes. Nothing has changed in terms of the issues. Literally, the only thing that's changed is our candidate, right? And so that shows you the power of the candidate. But it's all connected because we're seeing a groundswell. We're seeing people who've never been involved step up and engage right now. So that gives me hope, and it gives me encouragement that it will trickle down, not just to from the presidential campaign, but all the way down the ballot, because we need that right now. We really need that right now, especially because back to, your point on redistricting and other things, I actually have always believed that we had the numbers, but the lines are against us, right? Between the Electoral College and redistricting, the lines are against us. And so we need this more than ever. So it's an exciting time. We got a lot of work to do still, nothing to take for granted.
Yeah, I tell my Republican friends that their affirmative action is the Electoral College.
It is. It absolutely is.
And they chuckle because they get it. They're not,
they know. It's insane that the amount of disenfranchisement of real people, real voters, and ultimately everything that goes along with it, from resources and all the laws that, there's so much that's impacted by it. And I don't think back to what do we need to do? I actually think we need much more of a commitment to changing it. I love seeing President Biden step up and offer changes to about the Supreme Court. But this comes back to my point about constitutional change. I've long felt like we actually needed a true constitutional convention. I think our times warrant it. There are people who think I'm crazy for saying that, but I really believe it. I think the time is past, actually. We're past time for it. But anyway, because there's so much change that we need. It's not there's no single fix.
Well, speaking of Kamala, so my wife and I had I guess, a tutorial from Martha, our daughter, who's 14, on all things Kamala, TikTok, coconut trees. I haven't processed this excitement since like 2008. I know a lot of people are saying that, but it's true. I mean,
it is true. Absolutely.
2020, but it was still your COVID, and there wasn't, you weren't talking to people. Now it's like, I mean, she wishes she could vote. And sadly for her, she's a solstice baby, so she won't be able to vote in the next presidential election either. But she and her friends are really excited about Kamala, and they're like, is Taylor Swift going to be at the convention? Like, I don't know. They're
that's awesome, though. We need them excited now. Hopefully they keep that enthusiasm, right? And hopefully they excite parents. You don't need the excitement, but a lot of parents out there do. And I think they get inspiration from their kids.
They feel as though they've gotten the rug pulled from underneath them, and rightfully so. It's just so. What do you think is how does that translate? Do you think today versus 2008? I mean, do you feel the same level of thing? I think you just said you do, but are you seeing it?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I really think that the youth have changed a lot in the last several years. I don't think it's been, Kamala, although she's benefiting from what's been happening, right? But I mean, we saw it certainly with the protests over the war recently. We're also, I saw it. I mean, I have to say, a few years ago, just getting to know some of the Gen Z kids. And I'm not just saying that generationally, but literally like the group that organized originally to support Biden from 2020 and have been mobilized for a variety of causes and issues since. And I've never seen anything like it in all my years to see youth this engaged, this professional and mobilized. And so I'm hopeful. I'm really hopeful because I think they get it in a way that I think for so long, I mean, I do direct mail and I know we'll talk about that a little bit, but I think for so long our party wrote off the youth, right? We wrote off like they don't vote, they don't engage. And so, we've had young Democrats and college Democrats, and certainly there have been other youth programs. Credit to Tom Steyer's, Next Gen. I mean, we've certainly seen organizations dedicated to youth, but this hasn't been organizations dedicated to youth. This has been youth or dedicated to themselves and then forming organizations, right? And so I've never seen that before. Really haven't. Not at scale. Certainly you could point to some individuals who've been amazing over years. I don't want to say there hasn't been anyone. But as a collective, I've never seen anything like it. And I think it's amazing. And I think it's awesome.
Can you think of any tools that are around now that were not around in 2008? That are probably going to be
oh my God, we don't have time. Yeah, well, of course, social media. I mean, we had it until 2008, but not in the way that we have it now, right? I mean, barely. And we didn't have tools that really democratized communication, right? We had Facebook, yeah. I mean, there were a couple others, but even just the tools we're using now to do this podcast, right? The way people can create programs, create content, right? You have an entire industry dedicated to creators now, and not just in politics, but in almost in every industry. And that's because of some of the tools that are available. And so, I would say the tools came because the creators are the tools. I don't know. But either case, we have it in every aspect of the work that we do. We have it for organizing. We have it for fundraising. We have it for communication, And so I love it. I went to Netroots Nation a couple of weeks ago, and one of my favorite things to go to is they have a new tools competition. And I love going to it because I love to see the new tools. I'm always trying to figure out what's the latest thing. How do we use it? Who's thinking about what? AI obviously blowing up everything that we do, both for good and bad. I think that it is, I would say it's still a net positive. But obviously it's, got potential in causing already some real harm as well. But AI alone is something that has transformed what we do. So yeah, I could go on, but.
Yeah, so you mentioned direct mail, and I remember when the internet came about. I'm backtracking a little bit to like the late '90s, and I still remember like printing out the MapSco books and the streets that we were going to canvass, and then faxing the walk sheets to Washington. Um, and then I had this one memory of Martin Frost. He knew the district so well that one time I submitted these precinct walk sheets. So he's reviewing them, and the next morning you get a call, and it's like, who was on this canvas? And I'm like, well, I think that was Pedro and Mark, but I'll be sure to follow them tonight a little bit closer. And I said, why do you ask? And he says, well, Mrs. Jones is not going to vote for me because she died about 4 years ago. And then there's this other individual on here who certainly will not vote for me because I couldn't help him with this SSI. And he went down this list of people that he knew definitely either not alive or they weren't voting for him. All this to say is that, I miss working for that type of candidate who like really got into it and who knew the district. I think now a lot of it is done by tools and emails and whatnot, whatever. But I went off topic a little bit there because I had a flashback. But getting back to your contributions, Amy, a lot of people know you for direct mail. And again, when the internet really exploded onto the campaign scene, I remember thinking, wow, what's going to happen in direct mail? People are now going to get their stuff via email and through this computer. And I know a lot of people in the business, but direct mail, I still get bombarded every campaign by, whether it's a candidate or, cause, and not to mention the other marketing stuff that comes in the mail. But how has direct mail withstood the test of time? I think it's only gotten stronger.
It has gotten stronger. Absolutely. I think it's gotten a lot stronger. I mean, like everything else, we have a lot of tools that have helped it get stronger. Of course, this is a Target Smart, so I'll give Target Smart a shout out, Target Smart podcast here. But the data has really allowed us to get smarter and better in how we communicate and who we communicate with. You just gave the example Martin Frost, who was also someone I enjoyed working for when I was at the DCCC and he was the chairman. The data is still guiding us in so many ways and making us much more efficient. We can be still much more targeted, more precise with mail than almost any other medium. Other mediums, certainly digital's catching up, but it's still nowhere close. I think there are a lot of reasons why mail has stood the test of time, and I think will continue to stand the test of time for a long time. Most recently, it feels sort of obvious, but the pandemic, where people are getting almost everything they need delivered, right? And so, thank you, Amazon. I have a lot of feelings about the company that are not particularly good, but driving this industry of having things delivered has certainly helped the mail business. So I appreciate that. As long as the U.S. Postal Service is around, direct mail will be a powerful medium. And even if it wasn't, I'm sure we'd find a private way to do it as the alternative. So, but I think that mail does a lot of things that other mediums can't do. It has a staying power, right? Literally, tangibly, you touch it, you can keep it. Not that everyone does. Obviously, I'm not delusional. I know most people, if they look at it at all, are looking at it on their way to the trash barrel to throw it out, or hopefully the recycling bin. But, unlike any other medium, most people only have one, right? So digital TV, it's so diffused. How many channels are there? How many sites are there, right? And so people tend to check their mail once a day. Some, maybe only a couple times a week, especially if they have a PO box where they're getting it for the most part. But it has a staying power. And over over and over, we do tests. I'm a big believer in testing what we do. I'm glad we test what we do. We didn't used to test what we do. That's another big change in our industry, right? Thank you to the Analyst Institute and others who have really upped our game on that. But, so many tests that we do that show that mail has a as good, if not a more measurable impact. And frankly, we'd probably do more mail if it wasn't so expensive. Mail's really expensive, so digital is cheaper, but mail's, has a marginally, again, but in the margins is where it matters, a greater impact, and so, yeah, as long as it's around, I think that we'll continue to see it be impactful. I still think there are ways, and I'm fighting with, and I shouldn't say fighting, but I'm struggling a little bit with some of my clients, because I think in our space, one of the things that we don't do particularly well is true collaboration. We're very siloed as consultants, the mail consultant and the digital and the TV and the data and the fundraising and the polling, right? There are all these different firms. There's very few generalists out there. There are some, but not typically. And so, our idea of collaboration usually is getting on a conference call together, right? And so we're really pushing to collaborate closer with our digital friends, because I think that mail can be, most direct response mail is done in fundraising. But I think we should be doing more direct response mail in persuasion and turnout, and really trying to push people to take action. And so I think people want to be asked to do stuff. We obviously ask them to vote, right? So that's an action. But we're really trying to be more collaborative with our digital friends of driving people, whether it's through a QR code or a URL or a tariff card, or somehow to engage with it.
So I remember when the conference calls for the campaign consisted of the campaign manager, the direct mail consultant, and the pollster. We have a communications director on there now, but last cycle, when I was at a previous firm working directly with campaigns, we had these statewide candidates. It was literally 50 people on the call.
Yeah, I'm still on a bunch of those.
I'm thinking this is a lunacy, but I wonder if...
I don't think it is. Well, first of all, I will say this. One of my passions, as you know, from Democratic gain and now gain power, is just talent, right? And I'd love to spend a few minutes talking more about that when you're ready. But just back to the conference calls, I think that we act too often like there's like this elite group of strategists who control everything. And so I think kind of democratizing some of the communications within the campaign so that people who are closer to the voters, which is Field and others, have access to those conversations and are listening and contributing, I think is really important. And so if you've got a big campaign, I see no reason not to include. That doesn't mean everything has to be done by committee. Don't get me wrong. That can be just a drag. But I think giving more people access is important.
I do want to talk a little bit about Democratic gain. You're known for having the biggest job bank that's, again, also withstood the test of time. There's a cemetery chalked up full of organizations that have come and gone over the years, but it's now really an institution that we've added to the Democratic Party's family. What if you had the resources, would you have Democratic gain in every state where you'd be?
Well, first of all, we're Gain Power now, so I just want to correct the name. We renamed it, rebranded 4 years ago. We actually reincorporated it too, so it was more than a rebranding. But yes, 100%. In my fantasy world, we would have Gain Power chapters everywhere, and we would have a lot more going on around talent. And I don't think it's just about us. We do. I have a lot of ideas about what I want to do with Gain Power. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot more work that I think we need to do around talent. And I think the movement, the party, and the progressives need to. There's a handful of organizations. Our partners at ARENA and NDTC, the National Democratic Training Committee, come to mind. And there's a Repower, which I love. And like I said, a handful of others, and there's some state-based ones as well that really focus. But at the end of the day, it's like a drop in the bucket is invested into talent development, into leadership development. It's really about leadership, right? Every organization is driven by people. It's not driven by data, and it's not driven by technology, right? It's driven by people. And so I don't think we invest enough in the leadership development pipeline from the recruiting end, but also to the senior end. Somehow people act like, oh, we should only train young people or new people, right? And I think we all need it. I'm continually looking to learn. Like I said, I go to the conferences, and I go to not just to network and stand in the hallway talking to my friends, but to learn, right? And I think that we need to really prioritize learning and having, you look at other professions, and they have continuing education, and they have it mandated for some people, right? If you don't take a certain number of continuing education credits and courses, you lose your licenses, you lose your ability to actually do certain work, right? And I think we should have something more like that, and not necessarily a single standard for it, but I think there's a lot to continually learn, and I want to see more people investing in that. I really think that we don't do enough. That is, I could go on all day about this. This is something I could talk about nonstop, because we really don't institutionally at the committees, at the America Votes and the C3 organizations, State Voices. Everyone does a little bit, don't get me wrong, but it's never at the scale on which I think it deserves and requires.
Yeah, I kind of happened upon politics by accident. I remember in high school we had Jim Wright was my Congress speaker.
We both had speakers.
Until the devil incarnate Newt Gingrich did what he did. But I remember him sending must have been the district director to one of our classes, and he said something that really stuck. It says, politics is basically a game of addition. You're adding people to your cause, you're winning. You're subtracting, you're losing. And if you like to talk to people, you can be really good at politics. And that was like the light went on, because I was and continue to be terrible at math. But I said, I can do this. And I started watching religiously the Sunday morning shows and everything. And they're not talking about math. They're all in suits.
I'm not great at math either, to be
honest. We have a $23 trillion deficit. I don't know. But be that as it may, that's fun. So we talked a little bit, Amy, about the Supreme Court earlier. Do you think that's the next big battle? The president came out Monday with his vision for what reform looks like. And I think a lot of Americans were shocked to learn that people like Clarence Thomas have taken millions of dollars and luxury jet travel and yacht trips.
Yes.
And
I think this court has really tarnished itself, right? They have really done an incredible disservice to themselves, to the country, and to the institution they represent, and they have caused it to lose credibility. We've always known, and it's human nature to be biased, right? And partisanship is a form of bias, right? We all know that. Going back, I remember when we Supreme Court decided the election in 2000, which I frankly think we don't talk about enough. The 2000 election, that is. I don't know how many, students today and youth today really understand what happened then. So that's, there have been plenty of bad court cases through history. You can go back to, separate but equal and other such standards that were instituted by the court. So it's not like this is new. Having said that, and I really appreciate the president's suggested changes. I knew a lot of people were talking about just expanding the court as if somehow, but I really appreciate the notion of term limits. I will say term limits for me is the one issue, and I'm saying this in many contexts, certainly in a legislative, and it's the one issue that I've done a full 180 on. Early in my career, I was really opposed to term limits. I remember then there were term limit ballot measures all over the country. As you know, I'm a big ballot measure person. And term limits is the issue that I've done a full 180 on. I used to think that, we had elections and that's how we had term limits, right? But term limits for the court and term limits, I think we should have term limits everywhere. I think we should have term limits in Congress. I think we should have them in legislatures. I think that, unfortunately, and I say this about our Democratic friends too, the power of incumbency is really corrupting. And it's taken me a long time to realize that. As you might recall, I stood up and really had a fight with our party a few years ago, a pretty public fight anyway, when our party went to try to protect incumbents by banning consultants from working against them. I took a pretty public stand against that, which was not something I'm proud of it, but I didn't relish it. I don't like fighting with our party about anything. But I think when we see people fighting to protect incumbents rather than protect people is when we're losing, right? We're losing our own soul. And so I have mad respect for our democratic relationship. Don't get me wrong. And particularly Speaker Emeritus Pelosi and I'm a long time Hoyer person. I've been the treasurer. A little known fact about me is I've been the treasurer of Steny Hoyer's PACs for 20 years now. And so I'm a big Hoyer fan. But when our leadership fights for incumbents over people, right, and pushes back against democracy, which is running for office, we have a real problem. But back to the court, I think that term limits are necessary. And I'm glad to see the president advocating for that. I'm a little unclear about the vehicle, and other than back to more constitutional reform. But that goes back to my point about needing more constitutional reform.
So sticking to that theme, you mentioned all the work that you've done on ballot initiatives. I really do believe that Gen Z is going to amend the Constitution. They're going to amend the Second Amendment, whether the older folks listening to this like it or not, because they've lived with these drills that, quite frankly, I think are terrifying. Right? When you tell a kid, go hide in that closet, or I remember tornado drills in Texas. We did those every month, every other week, just to be prepared. I
got to tell you again, back to just having been at Netroots a couple weeks ago. I had the privilege of seeing Representative Justin Jones in person speak, and others, but him in particular on this topic. And this is the state rep who was literally kicked out of the legislature for trying to raise the issue, right? Which is just insanity. And obviously is building a movement because of that. We need to, the gun issue alone is reason to challenge this court. And I couldn't be happier to see the youth movement, from the March for Our Lives to seeing David Hogue's new organization's root candidates to run. We're really seeing amazing leadership on this issue. I'm just heartbroken it's needed, but it is.
Well, and I'm going to switch gears a little bit here, but, as data operatives, I think we tend to overthink the political science. You alluded to that earlier. We now have model scores for voters and a host of other nuanced tools. I took a step back recently and took a look at some of the numbers, just raw data. And I found there were at least 10 million more registered women voters in this country. Do you think that anyone in the Trump orbit ever has taken a minute to think, okay, it's a simple arithmetic here. We're going to pick a battle. We're going to literally make second-class citizens out of most women in this country.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of women are with him, and that is work that we have to do. So I mean, I think about this a lot. I think about women a lot. I would say gender equity, gender equality is probably my number one issue. And abortion is just a piece of that, obviously. But body autonomy and more. But, I have to say, back to just my excitement, seeing these identity groups, seeing the white women step up after the black women, seeing the white dudes step up after the, all of it, has been amazing to watch. So I'm more optimistic today than I have been in a super long time. But many women have not been allies, and particularly white women, as we know, right, have not been allies. And I mean, he's actually using something to his advantage that has essentially been baked in for a while, and preying upon other fears that they have, and so. Yeah, on our side, we just have a lot of work to do. I'm thrilled to see groups like, Red, Wine, and Blue, and there are a lot of other women's groups out there, Supermajority, tackling this from a lot of perspectives. I do believe this is an abortion election, but having said that, abortion is not the only issue women care about, right? And if we aren't talking about more economic issues, right, and education, I worry we're not going to get those women back to our side. We got a lot of work to do. Women are fired up, and we're fired up about abortion. We're fired up about a lot of things, but I worry that we still have a lot of work to do on his side. And we have a lot of work to do on registration. I saw some numbers, and I know there's been a surge. Again, there's been a surge in everything. There's been a surge in enthusiasm. There's been a surge in fundraising. There's been a surge in voter registration. But we aren't registering enough people. I saw some numbers a couple of weeks ago. I don't have them in front of me, so I don't want to make them up right now. But we are lagging in voter registration significantly as a party. And so you say it's an endless campaign, a nonstop campaign. It is. There's so many things we have to do. It's not one thing or two or three things. It's everything, and I'm glad that we largely have the infrastructure in place. I do think, candidly, we spend too much money on media, and I might even count mail, not personally. I think we need to spend a lot more early on the registration and on the engagement side, than just the amount of money that we spend on persuading voters and linear TV and otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, that's where it gets complicated, right? Because having been born and raised in Texas, for example, you can't, if I live in Fort Worth, which is where I was born and reared, I can't register voters outside of my county without being deputized. And if you get caught, it's like 10 years in prison or whatever. But be that as it may, it's tough. And to your point about white women, I think this week they had this White Women for Kamala call that raised millions of dollars. So that was heartening. But you're right. I think it was, memory serves me, the Democratic nominee hasn't gotten a majority of white women to vote for it since LBJ, I think, if memory serves me correct. So I think this might be, hopefully this is a year.
I hope so. I really hope so. I mean, I think we have a lot of work to do between now and November. I still think it's the activists who are ginned up and not the apathetic. And we've got work to do on the apathetic, and hopefully maybe Kamala makes them less apathetic. But whatever it is, I do think it's something we have to do all the time. It's funny. I thought a lot about, and I'm sure those of us who do this work have all thought a lot about community and sort of the tribalism nature of our work, just because the way these calls have sort of organically formed. And on the one hand, it's just beautiful to see, right? It's really beautiful to see. And on the other hand, I find it a little bit alarming because I don't like seeing everyone so siloed, right? So I love it because I find community myself in it. I joined that white woman call and I was texting 5 other white women while I was on it about how exciting it was, and again, I think we particularly as a constituency have so much more work to do than almost anybody else. But you're a Latino male, you've got like a lot of work to do too. We all do, right? Like there isn't a group that doesn't have more work to do. And I hope that, and I do believe, this is probably why I'm most excited about Kamala, is I think that she can bring us together in the most positive way. I really think she can unify us, not just as a party and a movement, as a country. I think we've been so divided for so long. And I've been despondent about it because I do believe our democracy is at stake. If they win, and right now I don't think they're going to. But a few weeks ago I did. And so if they win, I'm not saying it's all lost. Like we're all going to keep fighting because that's who we are. But it's problematic. I mean, you mentioned I've worked in a lot of countries. I don't think most people in this country understand what happens when you don't have democracy, right? I don't even think most people understand what democracy is, in this country, because we barely taught it in school. Might have had some 101 government class or some civics class, but most people aren't really taught it. And if you don't actually work in it, and you don't fully understand it, and there's so much we take for granted here that you can't even imagine. The overturn of Roe v. Wade and the Dobbs decision, and there's been others. The decision of giving immunity to the president are just two examples. I mean, we can lose so much overnight, and I don't think we would recognize this country.
No, I totally get it. And, I worked for Anna Greenberg for a couple of years. And the thing I appreciated about Anna is that, she's very tough, and she just tells you, the candidate, what they need to hear. But most of her thoughts are original. And one that stuck with me was one day she told me, you just got to remember, we've been winning since 2018, and we haven't stopped. And I try to repeat that as much as I can to folks who get nimble and they get worried, and I use that, and I don't credit her enough for that, but I wanted to take this opportunity to do so because she's right.
Yeah.
We've been getting, since then. There isn't a special election that we haven't won, a meaningful one.
Yeah.
And where we lost, it's been because of poor candidate quality. We were asleep at the switch or whatever, but those are very few.
Yeah.
That's why I've never really been.
I really appreciate your colleague, Tom Bonnier, and his bro friend, Simon Rosenberg, who's a very old-time friend of mine as well. I actually was roommates with his brother in college. So I've known Simon a very long time. I really appreciate what the two of them have done, and they started doing before the last election, because, and I'd like to see more do it. We don't have enough of a positive narrative on our side, and the chattering class and the political class, and frankly, at the party. Again, that's why I'm so excited about Kamala right now, because I think she's presenting not just a positive vision, but it's just everything about it feels positive and joyous, right? And so winning takes a positive attitude, right? I believe, anyway. We have been winning. The numbers are on our side. We have so much more to our advantage. But having said that, it's still always been close, right? And when we lost, it was close. And so we just have to do everything. We can't take anything for granted. I literally I have a reminder on my phone now. It's like waking up going, what am I doing today? Right. And I mean, I literally live and breathe this every day, but what's the different thing? What's the added thing? How am I going to make a difference today? And I think everyone has to do that. Truly, every one of us. I think that too many people believed that Hillary was going to win, that they didn't think they had to worry about it. Right. They really didn't believe the threat that Trump presented. And not only, did we now live through 4 years of it, he's gotten smarter, and his people have gotten smarter. So the threat, I think, is actually much greater right now. I'm far more worried, even though I'm far more optimistic. Those are weird, conflicting feelings, but they're both real. We have a huge amount of work to do, every last one of us. And so whether that's through our work, obviously you and I both work in this business. I work for a lot of clients, and I work, every day to support talent in this space and try to help people build their teams. But I also think about, okay, who in my family can I call? Who can I reach out to? What stranger can I stop on the street or on a plane or on because it's just like every second of every day, I feel like the only thing that is not on our side, although I, again, still feel positive, is time, right? That is like the one lesson, like we always have to remember. It's like, that's the thing we can't get more. We can get more people, right? That one-on-one class of more people, more money, we can get more resources, but we can't get more time. And so I wake up a sense of like, oh my God, every second that ticks, we've got more to do,
So before we close, I wanted to get your thoughts on the VP selection. I know everyone's abuzz about it. We got Andy Beshear. Governor Cooper took himself out of the running, but there's also Senator Kelly in the mix. There's Shapiro. I think the dark horse is still Big Gretch in Michigan. Either
well,
she says, I mean, that would be like,
not to toot my own horn here, but I started a Substack not long ago. I haven't written a lot on it, but I did write about why I think that Gretchen Whitmer and Kamala are the best ticket we could possibly have. And candidly, I wrote it before Biden dropped out, but I modified it a little bit when it was confirmed, and I didn't publish it. Basically, thanks to another one of your colleagues, Jamal, who I shared it with a couple weeks ago. He's like, you might want to wait before you publish that. And I really believe it, by the way. I really believe it. I really think that Gretchen Whitmer is the smartest choice to make for a whole variety of reasons. The last of which is gender, not the first, by the way. But to me, gender is like the icing on the cake. It is not the cake, right? And so I think she's the strongest. I think she's the toughest. I think she's battle tested. I think that she is fun, exciting, smart. I mean, I could go on. I'm gushing because I'm just such a Governor Whitmer fangirl. Having said all that, I think that, we have an incredible bench, right? And so I'll be a little disappointed if it's not her. But another post I did is like, I don't buy into the narrative that we need a white male. And I think that we do ourselves a disservice when we say we do. I think that, and by the way, shout out to the white men and our friends who did the White Dudes Call. I love seeing them organized too. I think we can get more white men without necessarily having a white man, right? I just don't buy into that. I really don't. I buy into having the right personality and the right chemistry. I like Gretchen because she's a fighter in the way that I haven't seen as much of the other guys. But having said that, I would personally probably say Walz is my number 2 and Kelly is my number 3. But that's, I'm not sure anyone cares about my thoughts beyond you at this moment. But, I think we've got great candidates. I know great things about Governor Shapiro, too. I worry about him a little bit, but I think Pennsylvania is a state we have to win. We should win. So if he can help there, great. I think Andy Beshear is fantastic. I think he represents what we need in the South. And I think that he can bring a lot to the ticket. I don't think he brings us Kentucky, but that's okay. I mean, I think he brings other strengths. So I think we have amazing candidates, and I think we have an amazing party, right? Like we really do. We need to sing its praises a lot more. And I'm proud of our party. I'm proud to be a Democrat. And I think part of that is making sure we know. I think credit to the other organizations, again, Ross and our friends that Run for Something and others who have really inspired people to run for office. I think back to being positive, I think we all need to do a better job at advocating, not just about our party, but about our country and our government. And that government is not a bad thing. I feel like Republicans spend their lives running against government instead of for government. And I think that government is a force for good. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with government being strong or being big if it's effective, if it's impactful, if it's helping people, right? A big bloated government that doesn't help people is a problem, but a big, strong government that helps people is wonderful. And I'm for that. And so I'd love to see a bigger government if it helps people, right? I want to see more healthcare. I want to see more education. I want to see better roads. I want to see better infrastructure, right? I want to see more investment that only government can do, and I don't think that's a bad thing. And I'm fine paying taxes if I'm getting services with it, right? If we're all benefiting from it. And again, I don't think we talk enough about that. It's not about big government's a bad thing. A bad government's a bad thing,
Well, Amy, you've been a terrific guest. I hope to have you back before the election. I know you're going to be very busy
anytime, Albert. My condition is I want to come to the farm. I like seeing you do it in the farm. I don't know if you're going to do more of it with you did the Facebook lives from there anyway. I don't know if you've done the podcast from there, but I love looking at you and all you do, and I'm in awe of you and your family and your daughter, and I'm happy that she's excited about Kamala. I'm glad to hear that story because that just affirms what we know.
Well, you have to love the farm to live the life. Getting up at 5 a.m. in January is not my favorite time of the year to do this.
Well, when I get stronger, I broke my leg in May. I don't know if you knew that, but I fell down and broke my leg, and so I won't visit until I'm ready to contribute. How's that? But it's lovely to see and fun to see. So, and thank you for having me. Thank you for doing this. Grateful. Thanks for all the work you do. Love Target Smart. Love you, Albert. Always fun to hang out with you, with or without a live audience or folks watching.
Well, we love you. We love you. And folks, remember to subscribe on YouTube and follow us on wherever it is you get your podcast, whether it's Spotify, Pandora, Amazon, you name it. We're everywhere. We're global. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.